Louis Braille, a successor for all blind people, broke barriers in history when he invented Braille in Paris, France in 1829, inspired by Charles Barber's night writing. This was significant due to the fact that it helped all blind people have an equal education and an equal chance in life.
In other words, in Paris, France in 1829, a blind person named Louis Braille developed a writing system for the visually impaired, inspired by the tactile military writing system, night writing. Braille is a writing system meant for the blind that is embossed from paper. Braille broke many barriers due to the fact that blind people cannot read and write.
Braille, an invention that revolutionized the modern world. It all started off with Louis Braille. Louis Braille was born on January 4th, 1809, and was raised in Coupvray, France, which is about 20 miles from Paris, France. Born into a middle-class family with 2 sisters and 1 brother, Louis Braille became blind at the age of 3 while playing with a tool in his father's leather factory by accidentally piercing his left eye. During the treatment, the infection spread to his other eye, and soon enough, both eyes went permanently blind. This is what led to Louis Braille creating the great writing system, Braille, to help himself and other people in the world who are in need of assistance in reading and writing without sight. This is where the story all starts.
What is Braille? Well, Braille is a writing system in which dots are arranged in a specific way to symbolize letters, which are then even more arranged to create meaningful sentences. The dots can be read by simply moving one's fingers across the dots, which are embossed on the paper or any other written platform. The writing system is read from left to right and is derived from the Latin alphabet, indirectly. Braille is meant for the visually impaired but can be learned and used by anyone. Braille is more commonly seen under the actual word on signs, such as bathroom signs at a school. Although it is not in its clear form, Braille has influenced many things, such as lines on a computer keyboard for the letters F and J, and also elevator floor numbers. Due to some of the words' complexity, they are sometimes shortened in Braille with affixes and logograms to take up a fewer amount of cells.
Timeline of Braille. In January 4th, 1809, Louis Braille was born in Coupvray, France. In 1813, Louis Braille lost his sight by poking himself with a stitching awl, spreading an infection which made him blind in both eyes. Once he lost his sight at the age of 3, he knew that this would create many obstacles in his life and would make his life much harder. In 1819, at the age of 10, Louis Braille moves to the Royal Institute of the Blind in Paris, France. In 1821, Louis Braille was introduced to Charles Barber's night writing and started to make improvements to the system. In 1829, Louis Braille publishes his first book, describing his systems, including the main points of it and the functionality of Braille. In 1835, at the age of 26, doctors diagnosed Louis Braille with a very dangerous lung disease, tuberculosis. On January 6, 1852, Louis Braille unfortunately died of tuberculosis and was buried in the Pantheon, where the other great French heroes lie. In 1854, Louis Braille's system is nationally recognized, although he doesn't live to see his dream come true. Inspiration for Braille.
Louis Braille was inspired to invent Braille when he met Charles Barber at the Royal Institute for the Blind. Well, he wasn't inspired by Charles Barber. He was actually inspired by Charles Barber's invention, which is night writing. According to riddlesbrainteasers.com, night writing is a tactile military code that is a response to Napoleon's demand for a means for soldiers to communicate silently at night and without a light source. In other words, Napoleon wanted an easier and stealthier method for communication among the soldiers during war and other battles. Although night writing was a creative invention at the time, Louis Braille thought it was confusing for 2 different reasons. Number 1, He thought that presenting letters and other characters with sounds would be hard to render the actual orthography of a word. Secondly, he thought that it was hard to read because you had to move your finger to read a full cell. Therefore, you could not read rapidly from one symbol to another. With these two major defects, Louis Braille decided to make an improved version of night writing, which he named Braille, after himself. Besides that, Louis Braille was also minorly inspired by the fact that blind people needed a way to read and study. Being a blind person who could see the world for 3 years of his life, he decided that blind people didn't have a chance to see the real world or even understand what things are. With Braille, they could solve the problem of at least understanding the concepts of the world. Motivated by this, Louis Braille invented the widely popular reading system and writing system, Braille.
Before getting into further detail, let's analyze the different perspectives on Braille. One major person who has used Braille is Helen Keller. Braille has had a huge impact on the community of blind people, and Helen Keller has proven this in many ways. Helen Keller is not only blind but also deaf, yet she managed to learn to read and write in Braille. Without Braille, Helen Keller would not have been able to do what nearly seemed impossible. We have an interview with a special guest who has great knowledge of Braille. Hello everyone, today we're here with Dr. Bashir and we're interviewing him about Braille.
Thank you for this chance.
Okay. The first question we have for you is, how has Braille impacted the world?
It helped many people actually to get an education and give people the ability to read and write while still being visually impaired.
All right. Second question we have for you today is, what are the benefits of actually having Braille?
Actually, Braille is one of the only languages for the blind. It's easy to understand and easy to read due to its simplicity. Over the years of Braille's publications, it has been modified to make it easier to read, and this is why it's more beneficial now to a lot of people around the world.
So do you know any famous person who's actually used Braille to achieve something?
Yeah, I mean, we know like the famous Helen Keller. She used to be a famous blind and deaf person. She used Braille and in her life to read and write, and that helped her to become famous actually. In fact, Helen Keller was able to say an entire speech and learn 5 different languages, which was amazing, and that will never happen without using the Braille. And this has clearly showed that Braille has been a very useful factor in the life of the visually impaired people. And I have like a relative who used Braille to achieve a lot of success in their lifetime, to become a lawyer and a famous lawyer in my country. So I think it helped a lot of those disabled, visually impaired people to make success during this life.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
To wrap it all up, the invention of Braille has impacted the world due to the fact that now many people across the globe can read and write without needing to use their vision. This has helped the world and all the blind people in need of an education that they have never gotten until Louis Braille and his invention helped the blind in giving them a better and more educated life that they have all been looking for. Louis Braille has done a great deal of things to our world and has changed the world by giving people more opportunities. Without Louis Braille, things today would be very different and people would still not get the education they need because of their disability. Louis Braille is indeed a big changer of our world, and thanks to him, he has gave the blind people new chances that they've never had before.